So, and we get the flag.
How's it going, everyone, and welcome in for the season opening edition of the unofficial WCC Hoops podcast. It is indeed opening night, or the opening week of the college basketball season, getting started on Monday. Obviously, this is one of the more exciting dates on the calendar for me. This is college basketball has started. We're back. And we'll get into some of the key games and matchups as we go along. Before doing anything, hit that subscribe button and follow along on social media at Post by Zach and at Unofficial WCC Pod. We'll also talk a little bit, or I'm going to talk about the announcement of Grand Canyon not joining the WCC, and in fact, the announcement that they will officially join the Mountain West in 2026. So a few comments on that and the news of what not only the announcement of them leaving does for them, but also what it means for the WCC and looking forward of what maybe the possibilities are on that. And as I said, it's opening night of the college basketball season. There are 7 of the 11 teams that are getting started on Monday, starting off with Santa Clara against St. Louis in South Dakota at the Pentagon, which is an event being held by the field of 68. So that's going to be a great watch there. And I'll get into that game a little bit more. Utah Tech at Oregon State, Towson at St. Mary's, Life Pacific at LMU, William Jessup at Pacific, Portland State is heading to Washington State. And then the big game, obviously on Monday night, the one that everyone's going to be watching following Monday Night Football is Baylor and Gonzaga from Spokane Arena. And definitely going to get into a couple of these games more in depth, but the one I do think that's a little bit of a sleeper on this opening slate is going to be that Towson St. Mary's game. St. Mary's, obviously, we know a lot of new changes with that roster. No more Aiden Mahaney, no more Joshua Jefferson, no more Alex Dukas, and so Augustus Marcialonis and Mitchell Saxon are going to be carrying a little bit of a heavier load early on. This will be the first look at Jordan Ross being in that starting lineup. This is going to be a first look at Luke Barrett going into this season. I think he looked much improved just in the blue and white game that we saw a couple weeks ago. And also first look at Polis Morauskas, the Lithuanian transfer who came over from Arizona. This is a kid who a lot of people think is a all WCC caliber player. And so this is going to be a first solid look at what we're going to see moving forward from him. And this Towson team, while this is the first meeting between the two ever, this is a team that is supposed to win their league. They were picked to finish first in the CAA. So this Towson squad is going to be a solid opponent, solid test for St. Mary's in their season opener, 7 p.m. on ESPN+. Essentially, all the games are on ESPN Plus on Monday, short of Santa Clara St. Louis, which will be on Field of 68, and then Baylor Gonzaga, which will be ESPN2. All right, so there were 4 games this week that really kind of caught my eye as being the ones that I do think are going to not necessarily carry heavy weight, but can set a tone in this early part of the season. And while there are some teams I think have multiple of those games this week, I'm only going to focus on one per of those teams if they do have multiple, and I'll talk a little bit about that. So I'm going to start off, which is the very first game on the WCC slate on Monday, and that's Santa Clara and St. Louis at 12 p.m. from that will be part of the Field of 68 opening day event in South Dakota. And this St. Louis team, just think of it as last year's Indiana State team, but in a different shade of blue. They have a new head coach, Josh Schertz, who came over from Indiana State, an Indiana State team last year that went 32-7, reached the NIT championship game. This was a team that many believed should have been an at-large selection for the NCAA tournament. I thought they should have been an at-large selection for the NCAA tournament. This is also now going into this year, this is a team that was picked 4th in the A10. They did receive 2 first-place votes, but they also they have 3 players who made A10 preseason teams. 2 of them being Robbie Avila, who came over from Indiana State, Gibson Jimerson, who is entering his 5th year at St. Louis, and then Isaiah Swap, who came over from Indiana State as well. He was on the A10 preseason 3rd team. Now, the name Robbie Avila should at least be somewhat familiar to most college basketball fans. Anyone who's in it definitely knows who he is. The nickname Kareem Abdul-Jabbar last year might ring a bell to some more folks. 6'10 center, a junior who, again, came over from St. Louis with his head coach, Josh Schertz. This is a guy who led Indiana State with 17.4 points. He shot nearly 40% from 3, 4 assists a game. He is one of the best college basketball players in the country. This is someone who is going to be obviously a focus for Santa Clara, has to be a focus on the defensive end for Santa Clara. And someone who's, while there's going to be some familiarity with the system that he's coming from, because head coach comes over, best player comes over, so there's going to be that comfort level. But he's got some new teammates, got some new pieces around him, so there is going to be a bit of a learning curve on that front. Like, I see like that, again, good passer, whatnot. But he's got to learn where those teammates are and where they're going to be where he's going to find those spots and whatnot. But Robbie Avila is a huge part of this opening day game for Santa Clara. Gibson Jimerson, 6'5 guard, redshirt senior. This is someone who is a 3-time all A10 selection. He was averaging nearly 16 points per game last year. Really good 3-point shooter. He is St. Louis's all-time 3-point field goal leader with 312, and he's only 148 points away from being their all-time leading scorer. So this is someone, again, thinking about where you're focusing on, where you're matching up defensively. This is someone who you've got to pay attention to, who's going to be able to light it up from 3, and at 6'5 is going to give you at least some level of size problems, even though Santa Clara is actually a pretty big team, and talk about that a little bit as well. Isaiah Swope, 5'10 guard. Again, one of the guys who came over from St. Louis. He was another great 3-point shooter. He was 4th in college basketball a year ago in 3-pointers made with 113. He averaged nearly 16 points per game. To have a set of 3 right there who all averaged last year 16, 16, 17. And it's a core that's going to really obviously like push the St. Louis team, I think, to be one of the better teams in the A10, one of the better mid-major teams in the country, especially when you base it off the success of what some of these guys had a year ago. Even though they were with Indiana State there, and moving to a different squad can change some of that. But when some of the best pieces of that team come over, I think there's a better chance of this squad kind of like hitting the ground running and having at least a little bit of continuity between its better players. The interesting thing for this squad is going to be the trio of high major players that did come over. That being Josiah Dotzler, who came over from Creighton, 6'3 guard. Kobe Johnson, who came over from West Virginia, and then AJ Casey, who came over from Miami. All of them played a bit on the sparingly side. Kobe Johnson played the most for his team a year ago. He started 26 games. I was averaging 6 points a game, 2.2 assists. So this is someone who's going to be able to run that offense a little bit, and someone you're going to have to keep an eye on. AJ Casey is going to give them a little bit more oomph up front, 6'9 forward, someone who played 24 games with Miami a year ago. But in both cases, this is there's going to be a lot of learning curve for St. Louis. There's going to be some pieces that are not necessarily going to work right away, I don't think. They're the one thing I think that is going to be their challenge is going to be their size. This is a team that has 5 players who are 6'7" or larger, and Santa Clara has 9 of those players, 6'7" or larger, and 6 of those 10 for Santa Clara are within their normal rotation. Also, the experience level. This is another thing I think that Santa Clara is going to have an advantage on. 7 of St. Louis's players are juniors or seniors coming into this season. Santa Clara has 10 juniors and seniors on this squad, most of which are in that regular rotation. The Santa Clara team brought back everybody who was eligible from a year ago. You add in Carlos Stewart, you add in Elijah Mahai. The Santa Clara team is going to, I think, be able to hit the ground running, and there's between that, their size, I think they really do match up well with the St. Louis squad, even though there is some star power to the St. Louis team as well. One of the things I'm, at least for Santa Clara, because the St. Louis team is going to be good. They're going to, I think, really push Santa Clara. This is not going to be an easy game. But I think what plays in Santa Clara's favor is that size, is that experience. I think that continuity that they bring in the first few weeks is going to be an advantage, or at least we're going to find out if it's an advantage or not early on. If there is one point of the continuity that maybe is a question mark is Carlos Stewart going to gel right away with his new teammates? He's very clearly familiar with the system. He knows how to be successful in the system. But he's more or less coming back to a brand new squad. There's no one left from the team. There's no one left from the team that was in the rotation from when he was here. And Cameron Tongue might be the only guy who is still on this roster who was still here when he last was a Bronco. And I think the growth of Adama Ball is also another key component to this. I think him coming back, learning what he needs, finding out what he needed to know in the NBA draft process is going to be helpful as he continues his growth, his development. But how much of that are we going to see on opening night? We do know that Adama Ball has actually played some of his best against better opponents. And we saw that last season. We saw that against Washington State. We saw that against Oregon. We saw that against Gonzaga the first time around. We've seen it in spurts where he has been arguably the best player, actually not even arguably, the best player on the floor against better teams. But we also saw later in the season as he started to be banged up a little bit more that his wear and tear was starting to become a problem. Now, obviously, opening night shouldn't be much of an issue, but that's also started to happen against better teams, against Gonzaga, St. Mary's late, USF late. Do I think he can bring it against the better teams? Of course. Like I think we've seen enough evidence that Adama Ball is going to be that guy in a lot of these big games. So the big question going into this one is going to be, can he and Carlos Stewart find that gelling, find that meshing of the two of them and their styles quickly as they go into the opener. One of the other things I think about with this game also is, now, we've also seen Santa Clara a year ago with the same core drop some games that they shouldn't. And there is not necessarily that sense to me in this one because I think St. Louis is going to be a good test on this because while right now I think they were preseason KenPom ranked 105, I think the St. Louis team is going to age very well in the metrics. I don't expect them to stay at 105. I expect this St. Louis team to get better and better and better as the year goes on. I think that this is a team that could end up knocking on the door of the NCAA tournament if everything goes right for them. So it's someone metrically that right now is a game that Santa Clara should win. But the deeper this goes, it's one that is going to look better to me on paper than it does maybe right now. And if that is the case, is this potentially a missed opportunity if they don't pick this one up? And is that too much to say on opening night that if you don't pick up one on day one, a win on day one against a good team, that it's over? No, it's like you can't say that because one, Santa Clara does have more opportunities to get some good wins, but this first one, I wonder if can be that tone setter. If you go out to South Dakota, go to a neutral site, get a win like this against a team with the names and not with the names and notoriety that some of these guys have, the Robbie Avilas and whatnot, how much that can propel you, but could it also make you rethink things of like, if you lose this one and then you think about, does the next one, which is Arizona State, later in the week, does that become a must win? Does that start to spiral quickly? Or can this be an isolated, don't worry about everything else, just think about what the opportunity is today, worry about Arizona State later, and only focus on Arizona State as you play them on Friday? It's a concern. It's not a concern because I do think Santa Clara is going to pick this one up. I like Santa Clara in this game. I think because of their veteran experience, because that they have been able to prove they can do it on the road, on neutral sites, this is a team with star power, even though it's maybe like understated star power. There's no Robbie Avila obviously on this team, but you look at Santa Clara, like with Ball, with Stewart, even the likes of, like, look at Christoph Tilley and Johnny O'Neill, like there is depth to this squad that I think is going to lend itself well in this game against St. Louis. Their size is going to be an advantage. That continuity, I'm going to keep knocking on that door that it is something that's going to matter. And also, Herb Sendek has proven on the coaching front that like he can find ways to win these ball games in tough situations and tough environments, and really keep his guys on the level, because it's very easily on opening night that you can almost like be too excited for this moment. And for a lot of St. Louis's guys, or at least some of St. Louis's guys, they've kind of played in this larger of an environment before. Again, going deeper and deeper into the NIT for some of these guys is a postseason experience that is going to lend themselves well for an environment like this. But I think with the amount of newness that there is on the St. Louis side, that those little bits of inconsistencies and learning curve is going to appear on this night, appear on opening day. So in this one, I like Santa Clara. I would pick them. I think this is going to be a close one. This is going to be a fun matchup no matter what. But this one, I would pick the Broncos, and probably this is going to be, I think, in the mid-70s for both these squads, something like 75, 71 or something like that. I could see that very easily being the final in this one. And the second game I have on this list is the obvious one. It's Baylor Gonzaga. Baylor Gonzaga is another one of these games this week that you really have to look at. And for this game, whatever the over is going in, you might want to take the over. Whatever the line is, this is going to be a shootout. This is the number 2 offense versus the number 7 offense. Mark Few and Scott Drew are familiar with each other. They know what each other is going to run. But this game, to me, like starting off, it's looking at Baylor, and it's looking at the guard-heavy lineup that they are going to roll out there. And it really all starts with VJ Edgecombe. So over the weekend was my first opportunity to really kind of look at some of his film and whatnot, reading through all the previews and the predictions of what Baylor is going to look like. This kid is different. 6'5", incoming freshman. He was the number 5 recruit in the class. And this is a freshman. This is a kid who looks ready for the NBA right now. A lot of the film I saw was from the Olympic qualifiers over the summer with the Bahamas, and wildly athletic, really smooth. He plays with no fear. He will definitely try to dunk on your head. He reminds me so much in a lot of ways of Dwayne Wade and Russell Westbrook. And parts of each of their games in what Edgecombe is going to be able to bring. You have to find a body on this kid. Like, leaving him untouched is a mistake. He moves very well without the ball, slashes to the basket. He was playing on Team Bahamas, again, for trying to qualify for the Paris Olympics. He was on a team with DeAndre Ayton, Eric Gordon, Buddy Hield, and arguably he was the best player on the floor. He was averaging 16 and a half for that team, 3.8 assists, 2 steals. That's in 4 games. This is a kid who's going to be a problem, not just for Gonzaga, but for everybody in the country. And it's going to be really fun to just watch him. If you haven't seen him yet, you're going to on Monday night, and he just jumps off the screen. That was just the wow initial impression of when I got to see the film on him. But Baylor overall, this is just highlighting the one piece of what is probably going to be a 4-guard lineup for the Bears. Jaden Nunn is another part of that 6'4" guard. He was averaging 11 points last year in 13 games after another one of Baylor's returns. Langston Love got banged up, and he had to miss some time. Another 6'5" guard. Jeremy Roach coming over from Duke, who was an all-ACC third team. Scored 1,000 points with the Blue Devils. He's coming over to join Baylor. Jalen Celestine is another piece that is going to add some depth to this Baylor lineup. 6'7" guard. Again, guard. This Baylor team is loaded at that spot. Now, this is where I've talked about the Gonzaga depth over the course of the offseason, how that has improved, and especially at the kind of the guard and the wing spot is where they've had a lot of that depth go. And this is a game right off the bat that's going to challenge that depth. They're going to attack the rim, and that's going to be a challenge for not only the guards, because just looking at it, like, I think Nolan Hickman and Ryan Nembhard are going to have some challenges with this group, especially like trying to figure out who's going to be guarding Edgecombe or how do you kind of slow him down. It does feel like this is going to be more of a Khalif Battle assignment. He's going to have a little bit more of that size, a little bit more of that quickness that you need to try to keep an eye on Edgecombe, because he's the type of player, like, you're not going to stop him, but you at least can try to find ways to slow him down. And I think Battle will get that first shot. I don't think it's going to be one guy. I think it's going to be a collection of guys who are going to try to slow him down, double teaming, just trying to find those angles to keep him out of the lane and keep him contained to an extent. But he's also a good enough shooter that it may not matter, that if you leave him out on the 3-point line, he's going to do enough damage out there that you might have to try something else. All that said, I think this is also going to be one of those opportunities I also talked about. Could we see a 4-guard lineup from Gonzaga just to try to match up with what some teams might try to do? And this Baylor team is one of those teams. So could we see a Hickman, Nembhard, Battle, Ajayi, and then insert center here for stretches of time during this game? I think we could. And that 5 could be Ben Gregg, it could be Graham Ike, it could be Braden Huff. It could be any one of them filling in at that 5 spot. But one thing we do know is that Gonzaga is going to try to run a good amount of its offense through Graham Ike. And the key, honestly, I think there's 2 keys to that. One, it's like it helps to slow Baylor down and makes them play a little bit more of a half-court game if they are going to go through Ike and do that. what I think could also help that slowing of the pace and really taking advantage of that aspect is not only what EK is doing, assuming he can stay out of foul trouble and whatnot, is also going to be Caleb Battle and what he's able to do attacking the basket, because that is something that he was incredibly efficient at, and also drawing fouls. And if he can continue to do what we've seen throughout his college career, attack the basket, get to the rim, get to the free throw line, that will also slow Baylor down enough that makes them turn into more of a half court team, even though this is a team that's going to want to try to push the tempo, get out in transition, and get easy baskets in that way. I think Gonzaga's capable and has kind of the tool set to try to slow that pace down on the other end of the floor. I mentioned the foul trouble a little bit, and the one thing Baylor is going to try to do is attack the basket, and they're going to. Is that going to be a challenge for the guards? Yes, but that's also a challenge for the Gonzaga bigs. And what we have seen a challenge be is Graham EK staying out of foul trouble. Last year, even thinking about it, there were 14 times in which he had at least 4 fouls in a game, and he fouled out 5 times. And he also had 5 fouls in the scrimmage against USC just last week. Is that a concern going into this one? If he can't stay on the floor, we've seen some of the challenges defensively that Braden Huff can have in that role. Now, with maybe a smaller squad on the floor, maybe Ben Gregg is going to be better suited to be in that spot in short spurts. But I do think for Gonzaga to win this, they have to slow it down at least a little bit. Because if there's a team that might be able to make Gonzaga play a little too fast, it might be Baylor. It's funny. I keep thinking of looking at this Baylor roster, looking at the way they play, and they're one of the few teams I feel that is going to make Gonzaga a bit uncomfortable. And because their style is different, because the roster construction is different, this is maybe the one style that Gonzaga is going to have a little bit more trouble with. Especially going into opening night, when you still have maybe some things to work on, and maybe defensively you're still trying to figure out what's going to be the best rotations and everything else. So going into this one, Baylor to me is maybe uniquely suited to really actually maybe expose some of what Gonzaga still has to improve upon. And I think that's largely focused on their defense. Like, we know that they're the number 2 ranked offense, but they're about number 43 on defense, which isn't bad, but it's not great either. So they're kind of like right in that middle. Like, they're a decent defensive team with room to improve. But this Baylor squad might be one of just the few that can expose some of what might be a bit more of a glaring thing. And I also think with the rim protection, Gonzaga doesn't really have a quote shot blocker in their top 8 of the rotation. I wouldn't say Graham EK is that. I wouldn't say Ben Gregg is that. I wouldn't say that Braden Huff is that. Like, they don't really have that guy hanging out in the paint that really is kind of like a deterrent to stay out of the key. So this Gonzaga team is going to have to they're going to have to, I think, limit Baylor to one possession. That, like, second chance points, and they're going to be a very vital component of what happens in this one. With Baylor's athleticism, and again, Edgecombe is a good rebounder too. Like, just watching the tape, like, you have to keep a body on him at all times, because he's going to find those cracks in the defense. If someone doesn't find him, he'll get an offensive rebound, put it back. There's so many little things I think that Baylor's athleticism, their quickness, is going to start to tip the scale in their direction in this one. And I haven't even mentioned the center for this squad for Baylor, and that's Norchad Omier, 6'7", coming over from Miami. this is another guy who is going to be a problem too. Like he averaged 17 points a game last year, almost 10 rebounds a game, steal and a half. And this was someone who led Miami in all those categories, including field goal percentage at 55%. So with everything that I think that Baylor has, and get maybe a little undersized at 6'7", like as you look at like Huff and not Huff, but if you even like Huff, EK, and Greg, like you do have a little bit of a size advantage there, but you're giving up some level of quickness and athleticism to this Baylor squad. And while this game is in Spokane, I really do think that this game is going to be tipped almost solely for the reason of VJ Edgecombe, because I don't think the Zags are equipped to deal with his explosiveness, with his athleticism. I think this game is still going to get played into the 80s, but there's going to be a couple of different moments late in this game where I think that his presence and his ability to get to the basket, cause some havoc, cause some chaos, is going to be the difference in this one. Gonzaga's still a very, very good team and one of the best teams in the country. But on opening night, I think they're running into one of the few teams that is better equipped to beat them than maybe anyone else in the country. And Gonzaga's obviously going to get another chance later in the week. They have Arizona State later on. But this game against Baylor is, I think, going to be a good learning opportunity for this team. I think that's going to be a huge challenge. If they are able to beat Baylor, I think that becomes a huge feather in the cap of this squad, because I think that means they've done things defensively that maybe many thought they didn't have in this one, or either that or that the offense is even better than we already thought it was. In either case, this game, I think, is going to teach the Zags a lot about who they are and what they still have to work on as they go deeper into the season. And as far as an opening night game, I don't know how you get better than Baylor Gonzaga on opening night. So again, that one's at 8:30 on ESPN2. It's going to be right after the Monday Night Football game on opening night. The next game I have on my list is Baylor-Washington State. Bradley at Washington State. And that one's on Friday the 8th, 8 p.m. ESPN+. This will be Washington State's second game of the season. They have Portland State to open and then Bradley on Friday. This Bradley team is no joke. This was a team that was picked to win the Missouri Valley Conference. They had 46 of the 49 first-place votes. They've had 20-plus wins 5 of the last 7 seasons. They returned 61% of the scoring from a year ago. And it's really led by the preseason player of the year, Duke Dean, 5'8" guard, graduate student, nearly 14 points a game, almost 4 assists a game, 38% from three-point range. So that's obviously key one is there. Darius Hannah coming back, 6'9" forward, graduate, 11.6 rebounds, 61% from the field. Missouri Valley's second team, Zach Montgomery, 6'6" guard, 9 points, 4 rebounds in 25 minutes. There's also something to be said about also one of the JUCO transfers coming in, Corey Thomas, 6'10", forward, 12 points, 10 rebounds, 36% from three-point range. And this Bradley squad, again, they're experienced. They know how to win on a regular basis. They are picked to be one of the favorites in the Missouri Valley. This feels like a perfect opportunity for them against a Washington State team that is still trying to find itself. And obviously it's not, we know that the Washington State cupboard is not bare. Cedric Coward being there is a great starting point to kind of lean on. Ethan Price being there, Dane Eric Strupp. LeJean Watts. Like you look at the Eastern Washington core that came over with Washington from Eastern Washington. This really is a group that is going to, I think, hit the ground running a little bit more than maybe we thought. At the same time, this is also a team that has a lot of learning still to do, has a lot of pieces that still need to find their way how to fit with each other. I think this is maybe one of those games that Washington State is maybe not quite ready for. I think this is going to be a good battle. I want to see what Washington State is going to be able to do in this game, but this Bradley squad you cannot underestimate like what they're going to be capable of doing. This is a team a lot of people do like as one of the better mid-majors coming into the season. They have more continuity. They have some momentum going for this program, and with a lot of the excitement, a lot of like the expectations or whatnot, I think this Bradley squad is going to be in a good spot. They are a very good three-point shooting team, so the perimeter defense is going to be highlighted in this one. But as of right now, like while it's one of the games I'm watching, I'm like, this is a Bradley game. And I think we're going to learn a lot about Washington State in this one. I think we're going to see some of the things that you see are still question marks about this Cougar squad. And because this Bradley team is a little bit more set, ready to go to make a run. Whatever that might mean. I don't necessarily mean that like, oh, they're going to like run deep in the NCAA tournament, but this is a team that's set and ready to win the Missouri Valley. They look set to go back to the NCAA tournament, and hitting the road in the first week against a Washington State team that is still trying to learn about itself, I think sets both of these teams up well. Now, Washington State is going to be playing a very good Bradley team, and Bradley is going to end up playing a few other WCC teams in the non-conference. But as of right now, in this first week, like while I think this is going to be one of the better games, I'm really excited to kind of see what this game turns into. I think this is going to be high 70s, low 80s as far as a result. But I like Bradley in this one. I think they have too much going for them right now. I think Washington State still has some pieces still to work out. I want to see more from what the guards are going to look like in this one. I kind of know what the front court is going to look like a little bit more on this Washington State squad than I know what the 1 and the 2 are going to look like as we move forward. And with that sort of solidified on the Bradley side, I'm going to lean in the Bradley direction for this one. Then another one of the games, the last of the games I'm focused on and really looking forward to is on Saturday, the 9th, and that's Boise State at USF. 7:30 ESPN Plus. These two teams played each other a year ago, and that was a 63-58 Boise State win in Idaho. And the Dons were hanging around. They were within 3 midway through the second half, but the Broncos were able to kind of keep them at bay, keep them at arm's length. USF did not shoot the 3 well in this one. They were 4 for 19 from 3. They had 17 turnovers. Newberry, of the returners that were in this game, Duito Newberry had 11.6 rebounds. Marcus Williams had 9 points. He's 4 for 13 from the field and 1 of 6 from 3. So that going into this contest obviously is going to be a big circle on the performance of Marcus Williams. I think also the performance of Malik Thomas, the performance of one of the newcomers, Carl Lingard, is also going to be a focus of this as well. So we'll get into that a little bit later. This Boise State squad, they bring back the big piece, the leading scorer from a year ago, Tyson Denninghart, Mountain West Player of the Year. He had 17 points, 5 rebounds in the matchup a year ago. He averaged 16 points a game last season, 6.2 rebounds. He's another one of those lifers on these mid-major squads. Like he's 584 points away from becoming Boise's all-time leading scorer. He's on the Naismith Men's Player of the Year watch list, Julius Erving Small Forward of the Year, preseason watch list, all those accolades. He's one of the tougher customers in college basketball, and he gave it to USF last year. He gave it to St. Mary's last year. This is someone who is going to be one of the tougher matchups for this USF squad, and he's one of a number, I think, of tough matchups for the Dons. Another one is going to be Omar Stanley, 6'8" forward. He's going to be, I think, a little bit of a problem for this squad. He averaged 12 points, 6 rebounds last year, a little over a block a game. He also made, let's see, where was it? He was on the All Mountain West second team a year ago. So another player, he was on the Mountain West preseason team, who you really are going to have to focus on. 2 6'8" guys who are focal points for this Boise State squad. Another one that is coming in, who is going to be, I think, a good test for the backcourt of this squad, is Alvaro Cardenas, who's coming over from San Jose State, 6'1" guard, senior, 13 points a game last year, 5.7 assists, and a 2.7 assist to turnover ratio. So this is the guy who's going to run this offense. Someone who's going to take care of the basketball, someone who's going to really kind of set the tone, set the pace for Boise State going into this one. And that's the Marcus Williams matchup right there. It's, hey, can you keep this guy in front of you? Can you make life at least a little bit tougher on him? Marcus Williams, one of the better defenders in the WCC. So that's something to really look at as well. Couple of interesting notes are some of the transfers coming into Boise. And one is Dylan Anderson coming over from Arizona, 7-foot center. He redshirted last year, but just seen some of the film, good touch around the rim. He can stretch it out to the 3-point line. So that's almost kind of like a wait and see like how he's going to be able to adjust into the system right away. Another one of the transfers, really exciting transfer, Javon Buchanan, 6'7" forward, who's coming over from NAIA Indiana Wesleyan. He averaged 20.6 rebounds there, but he is someone who has really good court vision. He can play inside and out, looks to attack the rim. He looks really fluid on tape, even though, yes, like at that NAIA level, you take the competition obviously with a grain of salt because it's not good, but he was different from every other athlete on the floor. Like he looked like he belonged at this level and is going to be successful at this level. 51% field goal, 35% from three. Another versatile wing that is adding to the depth of this Boise State squad. And this is just going to be, I think, a tough matchup for USF, because I do think that while USF has the advantage in the backcourt, I think their depth there with between Malik Thomas, between Marcus Williams, and then Ryan Beasley, they have the advantage there, and I think they can win the backcourt battle. The challenge for me is how they're going to hold their own within that front court, because defensively they're going to be tested all night long, and staying out of foul trouble is going to be a big part of that. Dewey Newberry, kind of seeing what he's going to be able to do, probably with Degenhardt is probably his assignment. What Carlton Lingard going to look like in his first week with the Dons. And I think you're going to need to get some time out of some of the bench guys. I think you're going to need Junji Wong to also contribute in some way, shape, or form. I think you're probably going to need Zaba Gigiberia as well to step in and give you at least 5 to 10 minutes of solid play. Going into this year, one of the concerns for me is the lack of depth in the front court. And this is a matchup that could take advantage of that with the number of pieces that they have that can move inside and out and are going to grind you, because that's what Boise State is going to do. They are going to grind. They're going to make it tough. They're going to rebound well. They're not going to make a lot of mistakes. this is a team that's been to the tournament each of the last 3 seasons. They know how to win high-quality games. They've done well in the Mountain West. They were the favorite to pick. They were picked to win the Mountain West for this season. And for USF to hang in this one, I think for USF to win this one, while I think obviously being in San Francisco is one of the advantages, that backcourt I think is going to have a great night. I think the front court is going to have to hold their own, stay out of foul trouble. I think we're going to need, I don't know what, I'm going to say big game, but I don't mean it in maybe the way a lot of people might be thinking. I think you need a big game from Lingard in this one. And by big game, I think that means really it's holding down the paint and don't let Boise State get comfortable in there. That could mean just grabbing like 5 to 7 rebounds. Don't limit the number of offensive rebounds that Boise is able to get. Protect the paint. Make sure that guys don't just are not attacking the rim at will, I think is kind of the challenge here. I think this is obviously going to be a grinded out game. We like mentioned the score earlier from last year's game. I think it's going to be very similar to that. And even going into last year's, I mean, we didn't know what Jonathan Mobo was going to be going into that one, and he ended up being one of the key pieces in that one. And the leading scorer in that one was Mike Sharov-Jomps a year ago. So there's going to be a different cast that's going to have to step up for USF in this one. Similar cast is going to be stepping up for Boise in this one. Even if you just look at the matchup from a year ago, what does USF have to do well? I said the guards have to play really well. Well, 4 for 19 from 3 isn't going to cut it. They're going to have to be better than that. They had 17 turnovers in that game. They're going to have to be better than that. Marcus Williams being 4 for 13. That has to be better. So there are very clear numbers and things to point to from the matchup last season that you could say, if they do these things better, they have a good chance to win this ball game. They lost by 5, and all of that went against them on the road. If you add just 2 more threes, if I cut down 3 more turnovers, they win that game. And so limiting turnovers and just being efficient like we know USF is capable of being can flip that script. And I do think Boise is going to be a little bit better this time around than they were a year ago. But it's really about controlling what they can control. And they did a lot of things well last year, a lot of things not well in that matchup last year. If USF can clean up some of those things, they have a chance to win this one. As of right now, though, I think the matchup leans in Boise's direction because of the style of game this is going to end up being, and their depth in the front court, I think, is just going to wear USF out, and I would pick Boise in this one. All right, so recapping, I did have 4 games of the week, and so I mentioned, obviously, Santa Clara and St. Louis, Baylor and Gonzaga, Bradley, Washington State, and Boise at USF. So those 4 matchups are my 4 games of the week. I think they're going to be obviously great games to kind of be able to follow and watch. And luckily, none of these 4 are actually overlapping with each other, so you can actually watch each of them individually and not have to worry about having to flip back and forth. Okay, so that leaves me to transition over to Grand Canyon leaving for the Mountain West, which was announced on Friday. Part of the announcement, so GCU will join the Mountain West no later than July 1st of 2026, but possibly as early as the second quarter of 2025, if permitted under the conference bylaws. So this was the WCC, the Mountain West, and obviously Grand Canyon put out releases about the news. So here was part of the release from the WCC. Quote, "We are disappointed with its decision to seek membership elsewhere just months after completing its membership agreement with the WCC that would have enhanced its national profile. The WCC views GCU's decision as a missed opportunity to be part of one of the premier conferences in men's basketball. This is part of the quote from GCU. GCU is set to join an elite trio of non-basketball universities playing in FBS conferences, college athletics' upper echelon of notoriety and competitiveness. That list will include GCU, Wichita State, and Gonzaga. So, with those two notes, I mean, talked a little bit about this on Twitter, and the idea of throwing yourself into the conversation with Gonzaga as far as being like elite or whatnot, like that is wildly premature when you only have one tournament win. I'll say that. Now, unlike a lot of people who have been commenting or whatnot about this, I did like the move of Grand Canyon coming into the WCC because there is a reality of the competitiveness that you need to have, and as a conference, athletically. While I understood and in many ways agreed with the concerns about Grand Canyon academically, the legal cases, the diploma mill that it is, whatnot, all those things, I largely agreed with that. But at the stage in the landscape of college basketball, college sports in general, is that you need to remain competitive on the athletic front. And the bottom line is that GCU would have helped the WCC do that. And I mentioned last week that I do think that the top half of the WCC still metrically is still better than what the new top half of the Mountain West is going to be. All that aside, while I almost looked at Grand Canyon very similarly in the way of how I almost looked at BYU to an extent. And I mean that in this way, is that I understood the competitiveness that they were going to bring. I understood the value on the athletic front that they would bring. One of the issues I had with what happened on Friday and with the conversation as a whole is that the level or almost like the reason I also was okay with them leaving is because without playing a single game in the WCC, they had the arrogance of BYU without the pedigree, without the success. And that was the wild thing to me of like just puffing out your chest the way that they had over the last few months, the last year or so, but one tournament win. And sure, yes, it's against the team I have the hat on for. But this team has more success overall than Grand Canyon does. And we're not puffing out our chests like Grand Canyon does. Grand Canyon was acting like it was BYU or acting like it's Gonzaga before they actually are BYU or Gonzaga. And that's why it rubs a lot of people the wrong way. That's why so many people have a problem with the way it's being done. So that said, the thing about the Grand Canyon's gone, whatever, we're done with it. Bye. What's next for the WCC? Is this a potential death blow? And by death blow, I mean on the competitive front. Because right now, as you go into 2026, you are looking at a 9-team conference with St. Mary's, San Francisco, Santa Clara, LMU, Portland, Pepperdine, Pacific, San Diego, and Seattle U. That is your 9. And on a men's basketball front, it's looking maybe much like the WCC did in, say, 2005, 2006. There was one team that you could count on to be that tournament team almost every single year. And then there were a bunch of teams that were not quite there yet. That was in a window where St. Mary's was not quite there yet. They were getting there. They were getting close, but they were not there. Now, there's two things. What do you do if you're the WCC? How do you try to salvage what this situation is? Is there another team to go out and get? Is there a situation to try to enhance what you do have? Which obviously you're going to try to enhance and figure out a way to get a better TV deal with the group you have right now, that because you know Gonzaga is leaving. And you do have essentially every major market on the Pacific Coast covered. But what do you do? But who's other options? Denver? Cal Baptist? Like it doesn't feel like there's a natural next team that would fit with what the rest of the WCC is doing. Do you try to look at maybe some other? Do you look at some of the Big West schools? I mean, I know the Big West is very set on like exactly who they are because they are the public schools, more or less, of within California. But might a Santa Barbara actually be beneficial? Might a Long Beach be beneficial? I'm just trying to think outside the box and try to shoot some things out there because maybe those teams do make sense. They do also play competitively in the other sport. It's a great baseball league that actually might be able to pull in some better baseball talent as well. Bigger schools, state schools, sure, but you also are right now having the experience with Oregon State, Washington State. You're looking at Grand Canyon. You're looking at like to me, it's throw the idea of being stuck to small private schools out. Because the number of small private schools available is shrinking. And you need to think about what other competitive options there might be. So looking at the WAC, looking at the Big West, is there somebody who's maybe somewhat consistent that might be able to help that profile? Even though the last time they went to a Big West school, Pacific, that has not really worked out as well as I think a lot of people thought it would. But let's start with, well, what if something else happens? Back up before all the WCC looking at TV deals, try to add somebody else because one, I'm not confident about the TV deal. Looking at it now with the 9 that you have left, I'm not confident about what the expansion options are either, unless you really start to think outside the box of what you're doing. But what happens if St. Mary's leaves? Which there has been, we know, preliminary conversations with the Pac-12. And we also know that the Pac-12 had preliminary conversations with Grand Canyon, and Grand Canyon left for the Mountain West. I will say this. That move tells me that the Pac-12 did not have serious interest in Grand Canyon. That quick a move to jump to the Mountain West tells me that there was no real interest. That the group that is now made up of the Pac-12 saw Grand Canyon and went pass. That they did not want to touch that school, that they did not think that was going to be a good fit. Now, in the St. Mary's case, that preliminary conversation, do I think that there are positives to the Pac-12 conversation and to the Mountain West conversation? Yes. If you are St. Mary's right now, the Mountain West does check off a lot of boxes. It checks off a competitiveness box. It checks off a revenue box. And it also widens the kind of like the birth of exposure because that league does have larger buildings and there's different markets than you're used to, it does create a different sense of who you are and who you're connected to. Also, you're more likely to get a full share from the Mountain West than you are from the Pac-12. However, if you can choose between the two, or if you're given an invitation from one or the other, the option that entices me more is the Pac-12. The Pac-12 to me makes more sense in a number of ways. One, selfishly, I'd rather be playing the teams that are actually out on the West Coast. I'd rather be in Washington, Oregon, California than any of those other states. Like that's one. It's easier for travel. I'm in the Bay Area, so of course, like I'm going to say like those schools make more sense to me. But also competitively, these are schools that St. Mary's has largely kind of been in the same conversation with when it comes to best mid-majors over the last 10, 15 years. It's Gonzaga, it's San Diego State, it's Colorado State, it's Boise. It's like these are the schools they've kind of largely been paired with or like grouped with in those conversations. This is a league that makes a lot of competitive sense for what St. Mary's has continued to try to do. And it also, if you're the Pac-12, the one market you still don't have in your window, the Bay Area. You have San Diego back, or you have San Diego again. You have Southern California to an extent. You still have the state of Oregon. You still have the state of Washington. You've added Colorado. You've added Idaho. You added the Central Valley in California. But you still don't have that Bay Area school. And while Cal and Stanford are still floating there of like, oh, what happens if the ACC crumbles or whatever? I don't know if they would come back anyway. So it makes a lot of sense market-wise to let's try to re-enter the Bay Area by taking St. Mary's because they check off the competitiveness, they check off the market component, but not to say that they should get the full share like maybe Gonzaga does, because like I get that the TV revenue between those two is like it's not nowhere near the same, but St. Mary's is still going to increase the value of that conference on a basketball front. You were talking about best basketball conferences, already looking at that Pac-12 conference as it is with the 8 that they have. It's already amongst the top basketball conferences in the country. You add St. Mary's to that, and it gets even better. It gets even tougher. So, as a St. Mary's person, I'm almost like can we go to the Pac-12, please? Like, I'd like to go there and stay put in that region with those schools and everything else. You keep the rivalry with Gonzaga alive. You've played a lot of these other schools on a regular basis anyway. So to me, it makes a lot of sense to try to insert them into that conference with that grouping. And I think it does make a lot of sense to an extent at a lower cost to the Pac-12 to also seriously consider St. Mary's coming into that group. Now, for the WCC, if St. Mary's leaves, and then it's those 8 left, USF, Santa Clara, LMU, Pepperdine, Portland, Pacific, Seattle U, San Diego. What are you now? I think you're reduced to a mid at best major if that's all you have left. Definitely no longer in the conversation of being the best mid major as they sometimes were in over the last decade. They're going to be closer to the Missouri Valley, the Ohio Valley. Like, even adding Denver and Cal Baptist really don't change that reality of what the WCC would be. What happens to the WCC tournament? What happens with that event? Do they end up going? I don't think they go back to school sites because nobody's at school sites anymore outside of I think 1 or 2 really small leagues. But Do you have to move it out of Vegas? And honestly, maybe you do. Maybe you move it back to like the Bay Area or LA or whatnot. But it would be a massive hit to the TV revenue, to the TV deal, to your exposure. And there are so many things that would pull back from some of the work that has been done at some of these other schools, the work that's been done at USF, the work that's been done at Santa Clara, the work that's been done at LMU, and others to really like push men's basketball and really fund those sports, NIL and otherwise. But with the departure of Gonzaga coming up, with Grand Canyon no longer coming, with St. Mary's maybe next in line to make that exit, the WCC will look a shell of its former self with schools that will have an opportunity to actually break through without the two behemoths there. But at what cost? At what will it mean for everybody else without those two programs around? To say that this is still even a mid-major program. Are they a low major at that point? And only time will tell like how much of this actually comes to fruition. If St. Mary's goes nowhere, then maybe this is still something that you're looking at something of, again, what the WCC was 15 years ago or 20 years ago at this point. One team at the top and you have a bunch who are looking to break through. But it's not looking good. This is a bad situation for the WCC. There's not any good alternatives. Thinking outside the box and being aggressive with those outside of the box moves is what you have to do at this point. Because right now, the Mountain West has salvaged itself in the wake of the whole Pac-12 reshifting. The Pac-12 isn't done. The Mountain West probably isn't done. If you're the WCC, you have to act. Because if you don't, it could mean the end of what we have seen this league peak at in the last, say, like 5-6 years. And it would be regression after regression after regression. All right. Not to end it on that, like that depressing note or whatnot, but it is opening week. It is opening night. I'm excited for some real games to be able to talk about. Opening night, obviously, we got the 7 of the 11. Santa Clara, St. Louis is going to be a big one. I'm excited for that one. Utah Tech, Oregon State, Towson, St. Mary's, Life Pacific at LMU, Jessup at Pacific, Portland State at Washington State, and Baylor versus Gonzaga at Spokane Arena to cap off the night. It's going to be a lot of fun. I'm excited to watch these games. I can finally stop talking about the what ifs, and we can finally start talking about the what is, and see these games in action and get going. All right. Be sure to hit that subscribe button. Follow along on social media. We're at Post by Zach and Unofficial WCC Pod. That'll do it. Thanks for watching, everybody, and I will catch you later.